the idea of cutting off care at 6 weeks postpartum. I wanted to develop real long-term nurturing relationships with the people that I was working with. And so I decided it was time for me to jump in and do the work that I was watching my father do. And he was just so inspiring, seeing the results that he was getting with people and the work that he was doing, and the health promotion model. And so my focus is really more on family style care. So I love to do, infertility, prenatal, pediatrics, pregnancy, early family dynamics. That's really my jam. And yeah, so I think that gives decent background. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
I think we got maybe this remedied-ish,
Oh, good.
I think. Dr. Force, do you want to do the same thing? I introduced you last time, but why don't you do it this time?
Sure. So I've been in practice for 36 years. My interest is treating chronic and complex illness primarily, although I treat pretty much everything. So I have in essence a family style practice. So I treat everything from preconception care, fertility care to geriatric care and everything in between. And I really like that. So it can be a mix of anything. It's really interesting how varied every day can be in terms of the kinds of problems that I'm addressing with people. I'm particularly interested in issues that have to do with mitochondrial function, genetics, inflammatory pathways, having to do with the neurological pathways, energy production, methylation, stuff like that. So we think in terms of systems and systems functions and systems relationships, and so we don't think in terms of a single organ or a single system, or it's all integrated. So in my practice has always been that way, and so it's a beautiful integration of chiropractic, cranial, sacral, osteopathy, other osteopathic techniques, traditional Chinese medicine, and everything in between. A lot of clinical nutrition, a lot of self-care. So I wrote a book in 2002. I wrote a book on self-care called Choosing Health. So I took the functional medicine model and turned it into a self-care approach, and that's been really satisfying. So it's all about teaching people how to take care of themselves. The right care is really essential. The right care is like a catalyst for a person to heal. So it can be critical to making that shift, and at the same time, people have to know how to take care of themselves, and that's oftentimes the missing element in healthcare. People get healthcare, but they don't get taught how to take care of themselves.
Yeah, so we definitely have that two-prong approach with what we do. It's, the piece of coming in to see us, we're that catalyst that can help with the healing, but also it's about educating the patient on the specifics of their makeup, and the things that they need to do for their own health to keep thriving throughout the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. And I've been one of those patients. So Dr. Force was my doctor in Phoenix for a number of years when I lived there. And he was my introduction to functional medicine and all of these different approaches to balance. And it's a commitment. It's a partnership. So this is something that I encourage a lot of my clients. So I'm a life transition and recovery coach. And when people's lives have, gotten way off balance, I put together programs to get them back on balance and on track and thriving and all of that. And one of the components is generally, if they're willing, to find a functional medicine doctor and, do the work, get the assessment, see what's going on, and take control of their health. But it's a commitment. It's showing up, it's educating yourself, it's taking the supplements, it's doing the different practices that are required, and it can be overwhelming to a lot of people. Like I had the luxury when I was working with you of being a single 20-some-year-old girl. I didn't have kids, I didn't have a family to, manage, but I had a lot of mental stuff that I was dealing with, which is why I found you. So I really wasn't in a place to deal with family and all those things anyway. But it's, you're learning how to eat differently, how to cook differently. There's so many things. So it can be overwhelming. So just a little plug to myself. I help people become less overwhelmed by the work that they're going to have to do with somebody like you guys, in addition to everything else that they have to change in their life.
Yeah. And it's one of those situations of trust, right? You need to find a
Yeah.
doctor that you really trust the work that you can do together. Because we run into a situation, with a lot of patients that we work with who are seeing, 5 different doctors. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to get ahead, and make progress if there's so many conflicting, opinions going on for that person's health.
Too
So
many cooks in
it's
the
finding
kitchen.
that
What kind of
person.
doctors?
Well, we have people here who are working with a naturopath, an acupuncturist, an MD, with us, with maybe even a couple of different chiropractors at once. So
Mm.
you get into this situation where there's just too many things being thrown at them, and they get
Yeah.
overwhelmed, and then they end up doing nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, just
So
find
it's
one
about
great one.
finding that doctor that can truly be that base for you, that
Mm-hmm.
you really trust, and you're going to build that relationship with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
for instance, I really felt like I developed a relationship with you, Dr.
Yeah.
Force, and I
Yeah.
could come in and be vulnerable and cry and, and you
And
had
be
time to
safe.
spend with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And be safe.
And I'll show everybody that book real quick. I'm going to grab it again.
Okay.
Great.
It might show up
Yay!
backwards. But yeah, so, education, so much. So, and you both use applied kinesiology a lot in your practice.
Yes.
Correct. That's the basis for what we do.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? We did last week, but a lot of people weren't here last week, and and a lot of people don't know what it is.
Do you want to run with that?
Yeah, well, applied kinesiology is a tool. It's muscle testing, but it's muscle testing that's different from what most people's exposure to muscle testing is. It's not simply, an arm pull down or, testing for yourself to see if that's the right thing to take. It's really about an integrative approach with the nervous system and how we use the muscle testing. So it allows us to approach each person as an individual and figure out exactly what that person in front of us needs. Even if they have the same diagnosis as someone we saw right before them, it's going to be a completely different situation. So it allows us to really ask the body yes and no questions. Right? It's like binary code. It's like working with a computer. It's about getting feedback from that person's nervous system as far as what works for them and what doesn't work for them. What do you want to add in?
At some level, it's like hacking the nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah. You challenge the nervous system, and then you see if you get the responses that are within the normal parameters. And if you don't get normal responses, then you start asking questions by challenging the body in different ways to find out what you need to do to restore its integrity. And that's really what you're doing. You're restoring integrity to the nervous system. You're restoring integrity to the chemistry. And you're investigating that through the applied kinesiology. Now, we're talking a lot about muscle testing. But the deal is that muscle testing doesn't become applied kinesiology until it's integrated with doing a history,
That's where I was gonna go.
doing a physical exam, orthopedic, neurological lab work,
Labs.
that kind of thing. When you integrate it together, then it becomes applied kinesiology.
It's about taking all of those pieces, because we love allopathic diagnostics, right? So we run lab studies, we run full physicals in the office, we'll run heart rate variabilities and heart sound recordings and blood pressure dynamics and full urinalysis and all those things. And we take all of those pieces and then use the applied kinesiology to then distill it into that individual. What does this person need?
So we can even have enough information where we can distill down, like say we do a genetic curation. So we can know which enzyme systems are likely to be compromised in that person. And so even if we have that detailed information, if you take a single enzyme in the body, there are still a number of moving parts in terms of the different nutrients that can upregulate or downregulate that enzyme expression. So how would you know exactly what that person needs? You can do trial and error, or you can use the AK to chunk things down and be more on the money from the get-go.
Finding the specific form of thiamine that person needs. You see it that they need it, but what form is right for them, right? Are we going to try this form for 6 weeks and then that form and then this form?
Yeah.
Or do we use applied kinesiology to pinpoint which one's right?
So here's a really good example of using applied kinesiology. Say we use phonocardiography. So we graph heart sounds. If you look at the S1, the first heart sound, and it's split, it's too wide, the most common reason for that is a thiamine deficiency. So we know that there's a thiamine deficiency. We could look at the lab work too and see there's a low carbon dioxide. That's another bit of information that indicates that there's a likely a thiamine deficiency. And then when we get to that point that we know that that's an issue, then we may still have the question of what kind of thiamine, because there are multiple types of thiamine that the person might need. So then we can go. Hi, Nikki.
There you are.
You there?
Yeah,
Yes. It's
We're
just an
back.
adventure this
We're
afternoon.
back. We're back. It's an
all about
adventure.
managing
It's an
stress.
adventure. Okay, it is.
So-
It is. I
So
may
that's
just
an
hold it.
example of using all these different data points and then drilling down to the point where you know within a very narrow parameter what that person needs. But then you can use the applied kinesiology to drill it down more to find the exact form of thiamine that they might need. You know, and it just makes everything. It greases the gears for everything to be much more to the point and rapid in terms of that person progressing.
And applied kinesiology is a great feedback tool for patients because they can see, you know, what works and what doesn't, right? And that gets them more on board with knowing that what we're doing is going to make a change.
So they're watching their bodies react.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had a patient today. I've been working with him for a little while, and he's been happy with the results, but he's not really gotten a feel for the muscle testing. So today, there was an issue about him with hives being triggered by exercise, sweating, and then triggering a hive reaction. Well, real commonly, that can be related to a calcium deficiency. So what I did is I tested him with phosphorus, which is the opposite mineral, the opposing mineral. So he had global inhibition of every muscle in his body to tasting phosphorus, and that was real obvious to him. And then I gave him calcium, and immediately all the muscles were facilitated, which was really obvious. And he said, you know, that's the first time I've really gotten that. And they said, you thought I was just faking it for every visit before, right? Yeah.
Well, the first time I remember doing it, it's just like, you know, do I have some subconscious thing that is making my arm weak right now? Or, you know, like those sorts of things. And it was interesting last week when you were talking about how smell and taste are such, you know, bigger, stronger, I don't know, testing methods of it.
Well, that's really the accurate way to do it.
Yeah.
The rest is just
because
neurologically based.
There's a direct connection between smell or taste to the hypothalamus. And that's how we can have that systemic effect to see what's going to happen on the body. Yeah.
Well, it's super cool. Just before we go into stress, what's the background? Like, where did applied kinesiology come from? When did that kind of start being? So
George Goodhart originated applied kinesiology, and he was a very eclectic chiropractor from the beginning of his practice. And he came from a family of chiropractors who believed in treating the whole body. So they always had a family-oriented practice, you know, using physical exam and orthopedic neurological exams, lab work, etc. So he was always oriented that way. And then he ran across Kendall for muscle testing orthopedically, using in an orthopedic and physical medicine, physical therapy sense. And he started using muscle testing, looking at the nerve supply for that muscle. So say, for instance, you take a rotator cuff muscle like the subscapularis. So that's supplied by nerves in the lower area of the neck, mid and lower area of the neck. So he could test that muscle and then go and make it a correction and a chiropractic adjustment to the cervical spine, to the neck, and then observe the difference in the tone of that muscle. So he started using it that way. And then from there, he started asking what other things might influence muscle tone in that way. And so then he started looking into, he had studied SOT, so he knew about craniosacral work, so he started applying craniosacral work to that method and just expanding it more and more. And then he started teaching it to their docs, and he encouraged them to share their observations, bringing other things in. And so it just expanded from there. And that was in the late 60s when that started.
And that really encompasses true, like, old-fashioned chiropractic, right? Because if you take chiropractic back to its roots, you're looking at us acting as GPs, right? Being the family doctor. And so really using the applied kinesiology, that brings us back to that place where, you know, most of the people that come to see us, we're their main line of defense, right? We're the first person that they come to see or bring their family to if they have an issue. And then we've got a wonderful referral network that we can get them to the right place if we're not it. But, you know, that's really old school chiropractic, you know, is being that piece for people, that Dr. Welby kind of piece.
And always knowing when it's the right time to refer somebody on, you know. And then if I see somebody with a strep throat, I just go, look, it's do not pass go. You have to get antibiotic for that. You know, that's where you're going next. And just being real and grounded with people, you know.
I love that. I think it's important to bridge, you know, the Eastern, or, you know, not making it seem like everything has to be a certain way that aligns 100% with thinking that people aren't quite used to yet.
Yeah. So we believe that the best medicine is the most appropriate medicine for that person at any given time, you know, whatever that is.
Not being dogmatic about it.
Yeah.
You know, because there's definitely a place for surgery. There's definitely a place for that pill, right? You try not to go there if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
But it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay, so let's get into stress. And before we do, Hannah, I'm looking at our Zoom screen, or Dr. Conry, and you're just cut off a little bit.
I know. I keep trying to scoot over to him because now he's not on the Instagram.
Oh, I see. Okay, as long as you're cool, as long as you're good, as long as that's perfect. That's great. That's great.
Okay, we're trying. There we go.
That's great. Okay, so let's get into stress, because it is the thing that I think it's the root of all problems in the world, in life, you know, but for sure within our own independent systems. And it's such a big, broad topic. I'd love for you guys just to say what you have to say about it, you know, from a functional medicine perspective.
Do you want me to run with this first?
Well, I don't know. Okay. There's great. We're looking at many facets when we consider the idea of stress. The majority of patients that I see, when I mention that stress is one of the culprits for them, or a main culprit, they look at me and go, what are you talking about? I'm not stressed. Because so many of us don't recognize it. We don't know what it means, right? We think it's just this state of constant agitation and anxiety, and it takes so many different faces for different people.
The phrase I use is, a fish doesn't know it's swimming in water.
Yeah, a phrase that I use a lot is from one of my teachers, is nothing is revealed except for in comparison.
Yeah,
right. That's right.
So you don't really know you're stressed until you're not stressed, and you're like, holy shit, I've been so stressed for so long.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, there's this idea of hormesis, which takes back to the very roots of naturopathic medicine. And it's really about old school, like Swedish hygienics. But hormesis is good stress. You know, it's about putting our body under minor short-term stressful conditions that actually allow us to grow. You know, stressing our muscles gives us bigger muscles. You know, stressing our bones allows for situations where hopefully we don't develop osteoporosis in the future. You know, that little bit of mental stress allows us to reach mentally and grow. You know, all of those things are really good for us. The problem is that in modern society, we're just bombarded by stress. It's constant, it's nonstop. It's, you know, being on our computer all day. It's that ding of the checking our email. It's the, you know, constantly on the phone, or, you know, those sorts of things. It's stress. We're stressed. And it's not meant for us to live in that constant state. We were meant to run from a tiger, right? For 10 minutes. And that was our stress. And then go back to not being stressed, you know, those ups and downs. And we just don't get that in modern society. And then with the applied kinesiology, we like to look at what's called the triad of health. So there are 3 different situations that can affect our body as far as stress goes. And that's going to be structural. So that's going to be, you know, the discomfort and pain that we get in our joints, or the muscles not being aligned that they're supposed to, which causes, you know, subluxations in chiropractic, those sorts of things. So that's our structural. We've got chemical, you know, where maybe someone's thyroid isn't functioning the way it's supposed to because they're not getting the right cofactors and micronutrients, that sort of situation. And then we've got the mental and emotional piece as well. So all of those 3 sides tie in to the stressors that we're under. and who we are. Do you want to go into that anymore?
Sure.
Yeah. Feel like I'm taking over.
So it's all stress. Life is stress. Every moment we live, we are adapting to stressors. And so the essence of it is to be in balance with that, to not exceed our capacity and to replenish our capacity as much as we can. And talking about being on all the time, that's one of the problems with our culture, is that we're on all the time. And that's not good for us. It's from a Chinese medicine point of view, it's important to respect seasons. And we have the seasons of the year, we have the seasons of the week, we have the seasons of the day. And we need to respect those seasons.
Oh,
and the seasons of our life too.
Monthly cycle as well.
What's that? Yeah.
And the seasons of our life.
And the
our seasons of our life as well. It's important to observe and respect all of those things. And then if we're in harmony with those things, then we more naturally replenish ourselves on a daily basis, weekly basis, that kind of thing. And we don't exceed our capacity. It's all about not exceeding our capacity, and replenishing ourselves. Yeah.
And part of the work that we do is building that capacity for stress, right?
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. The more robust you are as an individual, the more stress you can handle over time, right? Mm-hmm. And you're able to bring yourself back to baseline more quickly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's a big thing.
A lot of it is assessing what your stressors are. So what I recommend for everyone to do, this is something that I did when I was 15. I had ulcerative colitis, and I wasn't getting good answers from conventional medicine. And I went to the library and made a friend with a librarian there and said, this is what I'm trying to solve. And she started feeding me books. And one of the books that she fed me was The Stress of Life by Hans Selye, the Canadian endocrinologist who developed all the models about stress that we use today. And basically everything that's ever come since Selye has just reinforced his model and just made it more intricate and more complete. And so a lot of the lecturing that I've done around the country the last couple of years to docs has been about the completing from the research of Selye's model. But he talked about the four stressors. He had four categories of stressors that he talked about. And you have physical stress, you have chemical stress, you have thermal stress, and you have mental stress. So those are the four stressors, categories of stressors that affect us.
And those all do tie into the triad.
And they tie into the triad of health, because if you look at thermal stress, your responses to thermal stress are biochemical. So really there's three types of stressors. There's physical, there's chemical, and there's mental. Okay. So then what I advise everyone to do to manage their stress better is do an assessment of your stressors. Take 3 sheets of paper, physical, chemical, mental. What are your stressors there? Okay. And be real complete. And then decide which ones you're willing to go without and which ones you're not willing to go without. Okay? Because there are stressors that I take on that I take on because it's part of my mission, that they give me satisfaction. Even though they're stressful, I'm not going to give them up because they fulfill my purpose.
But you have to balance that.
But I've got to balance them out, by giving away some other things. And so it's important to be aware of keeping those things that are important to you, but getting rid of the things that aren't essential. And it helps.
So physical, mental, and chemical, is that what you said?
Yeah, physical, chemical, mental. Yeah.
How do people come up with their chemical?
It's really illuminating often to do that assessment and really drill down and look at everything that is a stressor, everything that you have to adapt to, everything that you have to deal with, okay? And then start going, well, I can get rid of this, or I can simplify this, or I can compile these things, or I can offload this to someone else.
So the way that the chemical ties in when someone's doing that assessment is looking at, what their predispositions are or what they've been diagnosed with, that sort of thing. So that would be that piece of, blood sugar issues, thyroid problems, immune system deficiencies, those sorts of things.
So that's something that you guys kind of have to do a little bit more, rather than somebody sitting down with a piece of paper. That one requires a little more testing.
That's more on the doctor side.
Gotcha. But we can definitely sit down and say, what's causing me physical stress on a daily basis and what's causing me mental stress. And probably emotional can tie into the mental, emotional for sure,
For sure.
And spiritual ties in there too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think that's really a good piece of advice, because people just don't have time. You know, people don't take the time to sit down sometimes and do that. I sometimes, with, you know, super type A, overactive, overachieving clients of mine, I have them make a pie chart of, you know, what they do on a daily basis and just kind of like a weekly basis, and, you know, hour wise. And it's just
Yeah.
like, you're doing, you know, 20, you're doing 20 hours of work and activity in a 12-hour waking period
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
day.
Yep.
Yes.
It does, how do you, it doesn't make sense. How do you do that? Like, so it's just interesting for people to sit down and look at it. So I think that's a great
Absolutely. I have
piece of advice.
a patient that I've recently started working with, and she has long-term fibromyalgia and migraines. And one of the things that I'm having her do is, of course, we have to rebalance the nervous system, obviously. But so one of the best ways that we've found to do that is with alternate nostril breathing, Nadi Shodhana.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the quickest, easiest ways to get someone back into the parasympathetic, right? It just immediately kicks in that parasympathetic response. So I recommended that twice a day she take 5 minutes for herself to practice that. We went over how to do it, and she looked at me with this face of shock to take 10 minutes a day for herself, right? That's how stressed we've become as a culture. Like, what are you talking about? I don't have 10 minutes. So
Right.
it's a retraining for a lot of people to recognize that we actually do have enough time to slow down and take care of ourselves, and it's going to free up so much possibility in our lives if we do that.
And it doesn't have to take 30 minutes. It can take, like you said,
No, real
10, even,
simple.
yeah.
Yeah,
So if you don't
it's
know Nadi Shodhana,
self-directed. You don't have to buy anything. Just sit down and do it, right?
it's hard for people to comprehend that something so simple could be that effective. Same with meditation,
Absolutely.
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know, like, but if you think about it, like, the breath is the most important thing. It's the one thing that, like, we can go for a while without food. We can go for a while without water. We cannot go for a while without breath.
Yeah.
And so clearly it is a powerful force. All right, my dog's barking. All right, so let's talk more about, let's talk about the nervous system itself. If you guys want to go into that a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to run with this.
Yeah.
I just finished
Okay.
a 4-day conference with the International College of Applied Kinesiology, and more and more we're compiling the literature, the scientific literature that supports the model that the afferentation of the nervous system, the sensory information that the nervous system has feeding into the central nervous system, has a huge impact on the regulation of the autonomic nervous system. And you look at the autonomic nervous system, it basically regulates everything your body does. And so when people have physical injuries that haven't healed properly over time, they feed aberrant, abnormal input into this nervous system, into the brain and spinal cord, that causes more and more stress in the central nervous system, ramps up the metabolic rate, ramps up oxidation and inflammation, and starts to actually break down those systems.
And that's the kind of stress that people say they don't feel, right? That's that internal stress that they don't recognize. So this is
Because
one
it's
of those things
gradual,
that's
or
structural and it's chemical, right? It's not that stress that we think of as stress. It's that
yeah.
stress that's within our nervous system.
Yeah, so the more study we do, the more we realize how much revolves around a system called the NMDA receptor and glutamate. And the glutamate's the most excitatory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system, in the brain and spinal cord. And where there are higher proportions of those receptors is in the limbic system of the brain. And the limbic system of the brain is like control central for your brain. It's where everything happens. It's like the switching station for everything coming in and going out. And it's the area where you regulate your autonomic nervous system, where the hypothalamus and the thalamus and the pituitary and the autonomic nervous system come from. And so as that starts to break down from these physical dysfunctions, this load of physical dysfunction that feeds abnormal information into the nervous system, things start to break down more and more and more in terms of regulating heart rate and rhythm and blood pressure and kidney functions and liver functions and digestion and hormonal balance, and all these things get thrown off. The more we study, the more research we do, the more important we realize the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway is to controlling inflammation in the body, and that's a pathway that's run by the parasympathetic nervous system, that relaxed branch of the of the autonomic nervous system. So anything that we can do to relax that branch of the nervous system decreases inflammation in the body.
And you got the regulation of the vagus nerve tied in with that as well.
That's right.
So you just need to de-stress.
Chiropractic care, doing things like craniosacral work and other techniques, acupuncture-related techniques, those all organize the afferentation, the information going into the central nervous system, and then it starts to regulate properly and calms down and functions better.
Getting the right clinical nutrition components as well,
and the
self-care.
Yeah, and the person who originated chiropractic, D.D. Palmer, 130 years ago, he knew this by observation and practiced it and preached it, and he was told he was a quack and a nutcase because they didn't have the science to back up his observation. But now there's all this research that says that it is true. It's just true.
And I know that with Dr. Force's practice and observing him over the years, that he is so often, 15, 20 years ahead of the research, right? And it's just through, his own trial and error, finding what works for different situations.
Well, I'm going to change that. Just it's not that I'm ahead of the research. It's that I've read the research before it's become practice.
Before it's out there, general public. Yeah.
So I'll read the research, and the beauty of the kind of practice that we do is we don't have to wait for that research to go through clinical trials of drugs to address that observation or that research. We can just go, okay, by extension, we can apply this nutrient or this treatment to that to change that. There's no reason why we can't do that now. We don't have to wait. So I'll read research and start implementing it, and then it'll be 10 years or so that it'll start to
before it's really out there. People know about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's really like, find somebody who's been in practice for a really long time and has a ton of experience, as far as, what everything.
And someone who's willing to continue to do research.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Stay up on the research. Right.
School doesn't stop when you graduate.
Yeah.
That's a lifelong thing. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to be a good doctor, if you're really going to be able to help people, you got to continue with that educational piece. And it's nonstop. I mean, it's every single day, researching and reading studies.
I'm going to make a plug for Dr. Conry.
Yeah.
She worked in the office for 10 years. Well, she was there when you were there, and doing exams and re-exams and patient education and observing me work. So she's amazing. It's like she's already been in practice for 10 years.
Well, I totally.
And then she's super passionate about it, and I'm mentoring her, and she's just taking it on. It's amazing how fast she's.
There's something to being a second generation doing this, right? Growing up with it, seeing it in practice my whole life. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been living it.
Yeah.
You've been living it, and then learning it, and then practicing it, and so it's just like it's in your blood, it's in your veins, it's in your makeup. So. Exactly. When I say the importance of finding somebody with experience, I'm meaning you as well, because you've just been,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're younger, and, he's got some years on you, and, lots of more research, or just experience, but yeah.
And honestly, I couldn't think of a better situation than to be in practice with him and get to be mentored by him. And
amazing. I want to be part of your family. I've always wanted, love Dr. Force. I love that, at the time I was calling you Hannah because you were not a doctor yet when you were in the office, and, you were doing some of the testing on me, and it's just so freaking cool. And you guys are.
So what else do you want to talk about? Nervous system, stress, stuff like that.
Immune system. We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So, will you say real quick, autonomic? I don't know if everybody knows what that means.
So autonomic is that part of the nervous system that regulates everything unconsciously.
Unconsciously. Versus what?
So versus the conscious nervous system, where it's under your voluntary control. Now, that's a bit of an arbitrary distinction, because when you do something like alternate nostril breathing, you're controlling the autonomic nervous system. Okay, but it's not under as easy. It's not as apparently under your conscious control. So those are things like the vagus nerve that controls your heart rate and rhythm, controls your vascular tone, controls the production of the release of cortisol from your adrenals, things like that. Yeah.
Got it. So it's kind of a hack.
But have some control over, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because singing, humming, cold showers, all of those things help with vagus nerve tone. right? So we say autonomic, but there's so much we can do to influence it.
Yeah.
So we say a little bit more about vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve is a cranial nerve.
Okay.
It comes through the neck and it gets distributed to the rest of the body. Basically, everything above your belt line waistline is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And then the rest of the parasympathetic nervous, because the vagus nerve is a parasympathetic nerve, it controls the relaxation response, those activities in the system.
Okay.
And then the other part is the sacral plexus, which distributes mostly to the pelvic bowl and the organs in there. So that comprises, that's the whole of the autonomic nervous system, essentially, and how.
And therefore, cranial sacral therapy is really.
Yeah, and upper neck adjusting. Adjusting the upper cervicals makes a huge effect on the vagus nerve too.
So you can see things like the systolic blood pressure drop 20 points after doing a cervical adjustment or doing a craniosacral adjustment, things of that nature.
You turn on people's digestion.
Yeah.
You know, you can hear the gurgling start. You know, because they're finally getting some peristalsis going. It's amazing.
So it's like a hose has been kinked.
Yeah, go ahead. What was that?
Is it kind of like a hose has been kinked, in a way?
So when we're stressed, we don't digest, right?
Well, I meant the vagus nerve. When it's not functioning, is it like it's kinked? And when you do a neck adjustment?
It's more about tone, right? It's not about a kink. It's more about regulating the nervous system by bringing attention to that nerve itself.
Yeah. You're adjusting the thermostat, so to speak, by adjusting the information going into the brain. You're adjusting the thermostat. And so I'm going to tell a story about craniosacral work. This
is a good one.
So I used to treat, I was friends with the Dr. Shelton, who was an MD homeopath in the Phoenix area. And we would share patients and collaborate and that kind of thing. And one time we were at a conference and we're sitting next to each other. And Dr. Shelton goes, "Mark, you got to help me out. I haven't pooped in 10 days. I feel like I'm going to blow up." And I go, "Okay, I'll check you out when we have a break." So we had a break and I checked him out. I did what he needed was craniosacral work. So I did craniosacral work, which adjusted the vagal tone and cleared him up, and we did that. And we were sitting down taking notes. You know, we started back in and we're taking notes, and he kind of goes, "I'll be back." And he unloaded 10 days worth right then and there.
Just 10 minutes.
Oh my God.
And
good story.
So after that, when he would be lecturing, and he told me this, after that, he said, "My standard story when people ask me about craniosacral work is, let me tell you
a story."
Well, God, I mean, talk about a relief.
He had a lot of relief.
Instant. Okay.
So it works.
It works. It relaxes you for sure. That's great. He's a believer.
Yeah, he's a believer. He's definitely.
So next I want to talk about the immune system and how all of this affects the immune system. But before we go on, I want to do a little plug back to the Nadi Shodhana and how it seems like it's a nervous system hack, because we're not supposed to be able to affect the autonomic nervous system, but it does. And I just want to let everybody know that I'm going to do a guided Nadi Shodhana little Instagram, Facebook video, and I'll post it up tomorrow so everybody can do it. I already have it on my YouTube, but I'll post one tomorrow.
It's one of our favorite tools.
So I'll backtrack a little bit on alternate nostril breathing. Is at one point I did heart rate variability on 100 patients, and we looked at different.
I kept all the records and tracked
everything. And what we did was we used different relaxation techniques to see what would produce the biggest change in heart rate variability, and that's a measure of the vagal tone. And that came out on top as far as making the most change and most consistent change overall.
And the quickest.
Quickest of anything that we use. Yeah. And oftentimes what we'll do in an office visit is we'll test a person for being sympathetic dominant and then have them do a few rounds of alternate nostril breathing right then and there, and then retest them.
It can take as little as 3 rounds. To change someone's nervous system.
And then oftentimes not only will they see the difference in what we're testing, but they'll say, "I can't believe how relaxed I feel after doing just 3 rounds of that breathing," So it proves itself right then and there.
It's so amazing. Yeah, it's a big one.
So good.
Okay, so
Please
immune
share.
system.
Yeah,
Immune
let's
system.
go to immunity.
How stress
Okay,
plays into immune system.
stress is huge as far as the immune system. Hans Selye had a try to Selye, 3 things that he found in lab rats when he stressed them enough. And the first thing was that their adrenals would hypertrophy, they'd enlarge to produce more adrenal hormones to help adapt to stress. The second thing is that their lymphatic system would break down. That has to do, and when he talked about the lymphatic system, he was talking about the immune system. And then the third thing is that their guts would bleed. And so the second, as far as the breakdown of the lymphatic system, what you see in people is that the system goes wonky. They can have allergies and immunodeficiency and even autoimmunity all at the same time as the system falls apart and can't regulate itself. And so there's a huge tie-in between stress and adrenal function and then immune issues. And so that's why you see people become stressed and then they get sick. It breaks down the system.
And
adrenal. Yeah.
Talk about adrenals for a second.
Okay, adrenals sit right above the kidneys, and they put out a bunch of different hormones. They put out catecholamines like epinephrine or adrenaline that control the set point of your nervous system and also control things like vasoconstriction, and muscle tone. And then you have 3 other categories of hormones that come from the adrenals. You have the mineralocorticoids, which control electrolytes. So people who have electrolyte imbalances, commonly it's because they have adrenal dysfunction. So they have to urinate constantly. They constantly need to take magnesium and calcium and potassium for their systems to work properly. And then you have the glucocorticoids. The glucocorticoids control blood sugar, and they control the catabolic balance in the body, and they also control inflammation and regulate the immune response. And so that's your cortisol is your main hormone there.
And when we're stressed, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No.
I was going to say, when we're stressed, the adrenals are just working overtime nonstop.
Yeah, and then they wear out. They just run out.
There's your crash.
Sorry, I'm out, fresh out these days.
Do you think that's why we have so many people with autoimmune?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, because the immune system's all about balance as well, just like the nervous system, right? So if our immune system is on hyperdrive, it causes that autoimmunity. If our immune system is extremely compromised, we've got immunodeficiency, right? So it's a balancing act. Everything in the body is a balancing act.
Yeah. There's pros and cons to every function in the body, so they all have to be in harmony with each other. So they counterbalance and smooth each other out. So the third category of hormones that come from the adrenals are sexual corticoids. So they balance the functions of the testes or the ovaries, as the case may be, for the hormones to be right. So a lot of hormonal imbalances in men and women have to do with adrenal function too.
Yeah, and that's that tie-in with libido and stress, right?
Right.
Your libido's going to crash the more cortisol you have surging through your system.
And maybe your ability to get pregnant?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
How often does the life pattern change in someone, from being in a real stress state, and all of a sudden now they have a home and things are more relaxed and they get pregnant all the time.
Yeah, and often, people who are on that infertility journey, you hear these stories over and over and over, where they've gone through IVF and done all the treatments, and they've made the decision that, okay, we're going to adopt because this isn't working out for us. So
I was going to bring up this example.
And there they get pregnant.
Yeah. Hey, while you guys are talking a little bit, I'm just going to open it up to questions because we have like 10 minutes, and I just want to see if anybody wants to ask a question. Go ahead and just put that in the comments, and then I will have them cover it. But if you wanted to continue talking about, it's such a big thing to cover in a short period of time, but maybe how important is it that we think about our immunity and take action right now in the era of COVID?
So, I'll take it back to a study.
Okay.
And the study was done by a group called HeartMath, and they do really nice work as far as heart-focused appreciation practices and things like that have to do with managing stress. So they do a really nice job, and they also have a really great instrument for biofeedback called an M-Wave that's heart rate variability based. That's great. But they did a study, and this study is a while back. It's like 20 years ago now, where they took a group of people and measured their DHEA levels, their cortisol levels, and their salivary IgA levels. Secretory IgA is a measure of immune competency. And so people that are chronically stressed, they have low secretory IgA, so they're more prone to infection because of that. And so they measured those three things, and then they had that group of people practice heart-focused appreciation for a month, and then they went back and retested them. The DHEA improved, the cortisol went down, and the secretory IgA went up. So that's how powerful practice is.
This
like
stuff really works.
Yeah.
You just you have to do it, you know. And it's about those micro doses every single day. You know, doing a 1 hour meditation once a week isn't going to do the same thing as 5 minutes every single day.
I teach that as well.
Yeah. The key to conditioning is repetition. Yeah.
The gratitude's a big one too.
The big one.
Yeah.
I've studied a decent amount of positive psychology, and you know, my history of depression, it's huge. I mean, it was incredibly and continues to be incredibly effective. So in all of my yoga classes, we end with a gratitude practice. And and it's not just like a cerebral thing. Like it's like, okay, let's take time to feel it.
Those things are really powerful. So I'm going to jump on some more research. I love this kind of stuff.
Yeah, good.
There's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, and what it does is it filters out sensory information coming into the brain. So that's the reticular activating system is what's working when you read a book and you're not aware of anything around you, and then you hear, the squeak of a step, and all of a sudden you're back in the room. Okay, that's your reticular activating system that does that. It's a survival mechanism. Okay, in terms of being aware of your environment. But what it does is it can be trained. It is trained to filter out sensory information based on how you've conditioned it. So your reality depends on the reality that each person experiences depends on how their reticular activating system has been programmed or conditioned. Okay, so how gratitude works is when you feel gratitude for something that you're grateful for, you train the reticular activating system to find more of that.
That's really cool.
Look on, you see.
Right. And that's how that works. That's how the brain works. That's how it's designed to work. So whatever you have gratitude for, and as you practice more and more gratitude, you train your brain to find more, to be aware of more of that in your environment.
Well, and it kind of, obviously you can see it in the reverse with people who just constantly see the negative.
Yeah, it works that way too. Yeah, it can work for you or against you depending on how you choose to train it.
And
our brains are incredible.
Be retrained.
Yeah, it can always be retrained.
Our brains are neuroplastic, right?
Yeah.
So it's never too late to make changes.
Agreed. We've got a few people on right now. If anybody wants to throw in a question, put it in the comments. Otherwise, we'll keep talking about. I don't know. It's not like you can give, a magic bit of advice for everybody dealing with COVID stress right now. But anything come to mind that you want to say about, this time, immunity? Okay.
Another pretty simple thing is, getting good Celtic salt in the diet and staying real hydrated, because that all plays into the adrenal piece as well. A lot of people that are adrenal depleted are salt depleted. So using Celtic salt helps with digestion because it's a precursor for your hydrochloric acid. It helps to replenish the adrenals, and it helps with the filtration through the kidneys to make sure that you're holding on to the water better, that it's not all getting filtered out and you're in nonstop, urination. So I think that's a real simple one that everyone could utilize, is making sure you're getting Celtic salt in, staying hydrated, alternate nostril breathing. What else?
Sunshine?
Sunshine? Yeah. Heck
get
yeah.
outside. Get outside. So as long as we're talking about COVID, the research is overwhelming that vitamin D is protective both from helping you not get the infection and to helping you not have complications from the infection should you get it. And the sweet spot in the literature is at 60 or more. When you, to get your vitamin D tested, and to be at 60 or more is protective for both getting the infection and preventing complications from the infection. So getting outside and getting sun is a really good idea.
Especially first thing in the morning, and allowing the light, to come in through the eyes. Not that you're staring at the sun or anything, but, allowing that filtration of the light directly into the eyes stimulates the pineal gland.
Yeah.
Which is going to help with melatonin balance, which is going to help you sleep better, which is going to help your immune system, right? There's a tie-in for all of those things.
And then along with that, low-fat diets predispose people to being low in vitamin D. So it's good to have good quality fats in your diet.
Since I've first met you, Dr. Forrest, I've taken so much Celtic salt since then, daily. I mean, it's big. And I also introduced that idea and practice to as many of my clients and students who will be open to it.
Great.
And the sunshine, of course, and Nadi Shodhana, of course. And then the sunshine, I mean, for me, once again, with my history of depression, it's huge. Yeah. It's so huge. And right now, COVID times, it's like, get out, like everybody take advantage of summer.
Yeah.
For sure.
Winter's going to come around, and the sun may be out, but it's harder to get outside and soak it up. So it's such a big thing to take advantage of right now.
Yeah, get outside, take a walk.
First thing in the morning, take 15, 20 minutes and take a walk for yourself, because that's going to help with the nervous system as well, the exercise piece,
Habit stacking is what one of my friends says. Habit stacking.
Yeah, there you go. Love that.
That's a really great term.
Yeah, I like that too. Well, we had a lot of people tune in, but nobody had any questions today. But I will say that if anybody wants to talk to you guys more, is it okay if they just reach out?
Yeah,
because we're both going to post these videos, so they can go to, I think, Dr. Conry. How can they reach you?
So my email is drconry@theelementsofhealth.com. That'll get directly to me.
Yeah.
And he's Dr. Force at the Elements of Health. So
okay. And so next week we're going to be talking about depression, anxiety, and bipolar from a neurotransmitter functional medicine perspective. Great. Which is really exciting to me.
Good.
Also, I will also say that Dr. Conry has, she specializes in a lot of female issues or experiences, however you want to say that. So maybe one time I'll have her back on to talk more about her specialty, because I know that a lot of women would like to tune in. A lot of pregnancy, and I have zero experience with any of that stuff, so that would be cool to talk about. So next week, same time, 3:00 Mountain Standard, we're going to talk about mental and emotional health and disorders. I can share, a decent amount of my experience too. I think it's important for people to know that, I have a pretty profound, serious history of depression and, bipolar. It's been titled unipolar disorder. That's brought me to what I'm doing today, right now with you guys.
It's beautiful. We have experiences that make us useful.
Yeah. Sharing that, your experience, helps to take the stigma away, right? And Absolutely. It opens it up for other people to share their experiences.
Yeah, exactly, which is why I really, really enjoy doing it. So,
yay.
Okay, so reach out to these guys if you want, and follow me too. Go look at my stuff. Look at my website, nikkiaiello.com.